With the NBA's return continuing to inch closer and closer as every day passes, we will continue to prepare for it with a bit of a refresher of a video. In this video, we will once again be discussing the X factors, being the players on the team that aren't necessarily the best on the team, but in the right circumstances and based on previous production can be capable of making a big impact in the playoffs. This kind of impact is by no means guaranteed by them, hence being the fact that they are X factors and not star players. This is actually the second part of the series discussing X factors, with my last video being about the 9 teams returning from the Eastern Conference, and this video now obviously being about the 13 teams returning to play in the Western Conference. Before we get started though, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, as all support is very much appreciated. Now, with that being said, let's begin. We'll once again be going in order of the standings, so starting with the first place Los Angeles Lakers, their biggest X factor upon return is Avery Bradley. It's been a few years since Bradley has made a playoff appearance, and since his Celtics days, he definitely has declined a bit as a player overall, but at his best, he's still capable of playing some hard-nosed lockdown defense on the perimeter, and for the Lakers that are looking to make a lot of noise this year, he'll be a very trusted veteran presence out on the floor. Teams led by LeBron James have always succeeded most with experience around him, and the young guys typically take a back seat because they aren't ready for how big the moment becomes. But Bradley's never been afraid of any matchup, and offensively, he's capable of at least spacing the floor and knocking down shots from the perimeter at around a league average rate. He won't be scoring many points, but he'll be doing a lot of the little things, and that's what the Lakers need down the stretch. Next in the standings is the Los Angeles Clippers, and their biggest X factor upon return is Marcus Morris. Morris was acquired by the team later in the year through trade, and after proving to be one of the best role players in the league over the last few years, his stint on the Clippers admittedly got off to a bit of a slow start. He's become a sharpshooter on high volume from 3 over the last 2 years, making 41% of his threes last year, and while on the Knicks this year, making 44% of them, while also scoring about 20 points per game. But ever since he's gotten to the Clippers, his numbers dropped down to about 9.5 points per game, while shooting a terrible 39% from the field and 28% from 3. This likely had to do with trying to integrate himself into a new system on the spot, and I definitely don't anticipate the struggles to be that bad when play resumes, so if he can come anywhere close to returning to previous form, then the Clippers become even more loaded, with guys like Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, Lou Williams, and Montrezl Harrell around him. The next team in the standings is the Denver Nuggets, and their biggest X factor upon return is Jerami Grant. Grant is a prime example of why you have to have patience with young prospects that come into the league with a raw skill set, because when he first started in the NBA, he was a bundle of length and athleticism that couldn't shoot the ball at all, and now he's one of the most picture-perfect 3-and-D players in the league. Nikola Jokic is the star of the show in the middle with his elite playmaking ability and strong all-around offensive game. Jamal Murray is the primary shot creator and the go-to guy off the dribble, and then around them, the Nuggets need defensive contributors, and Grant is just that. Grant's one of the best bench players in the league because he's a versatile, impactful, switchable defender that can defend multiple positions, and on offense, he's a highly efficient scorer both inside and out, making 47% of his shots and 40% of his threes. He won't get a lot of attention amongst Nuggets players, but if he's playing well, then the Nuggets will be a strong sleeper team in the West. The next team in the standings is the Utah Jazz, and their biggest X factor upon return is Jordan Clarkson. Clarkson was one of the best mid-season acquisitions of the whole year, and it worked out in the best way possible both for the Jazz and Clarkson himself. After a very disappointing playoff run in Cleveland in 2018, Clarkson's production wasn't taken very seriously the next year on a bad Cavaliers team, but now being on a playoff contender again, he's thriving more than ever as their 6th man. With Mike Conley struggling both with his performances and health for a little while, the Jazz desperately needed another shot creator alongside Donovan Mitchell, and Clarkson has come in and proven to be a breath of fresh air off the bench. He's averaging about 16 points per game, and he's shooting an efficient 48% from the field and 37% from 3 while in Utah, and he fills the role of a secondary playmaker exactly how they need him to. The next team in the standings is the Oklahoma City Thunder, and their biggest X factor upon return is Dennis Schroeder. The Thunder are a good mix of young promising talent and solid established veterans, and while the team's first priority is to develop Shai Gilgeous-Alexander into the future star he's shown the ability to become, the older guys will more than likely be taking the reins for the playoff push. Chris Paul has embraced his role as a secondary playmaker that allows those around him to get theirs throughout most of the game and then take over late when he needs to, and it's Dennis Schroeder that has 5 years of playoff experience who is also having the best season of his career. He very well might be the 6th man of the year this year, and down the stretch of the season, his ability to create points both for himself and others will be critical to the success of the Thunder. He had a decent yet disappointing playoff performance last year, so he's going to be looking to make up for it, and if he carries that momentum he's built throughout the season into the postseason, then the Thunder could end up surprising a lot of people. The next team up in the standings is the Houston Rockets, and their biggest X factor upon return is Eric Gordon. Gordon is one of the biggest examples of a hit or miss player, because when he's on, he's really on, but when he's off, he becomes a huge detriment to the team. A good way to summarize the Eric Gordon experience is the fact that this season, he dropped 50 points in a game, and then the very next game, he only scored a mere 8 points on 2 of 10 shooting. Overall, he's having a pretty poor season, shooting the ball terribly, struggling with some injuries and fitness levels, and overall looking like he's on the decline. But it's the fact that he does still have those 50-point games in him that makes him an X factor. He needs to get back to 100% health and be ready to bring his A game for the Rockets to be able to make a deep push, because if he's out there tossing up bricks every game, then they could be in for an early exit. The next team up in the standings is the Dallas Mavericks, and their biggest X factor upon return is Tim Hardaway Jr. Hardaway's career to this point has been very similar to many of the other hot and cold wing players that we've mentioned so far in this series, because he too is capable of catching fire and knocking down a ton of big-time shots and changing the pace of the game by giving his team another scoring option. Pretty much every season though, his efficiency wavers, his scoring is inconsistent, and there are just as many downs as there are ups, but this year, he's actually started to put it all together and shoot the ball well on a regular basis. He's scoring about 16 points per game for the Mavs this year, and he's doing so while knocking down a career-high 41% of his threes. The Mavs are a lethal offensive team that will force you to try to keep up with them in the score, and if the team wants to continue this offensive prowess, then role players like Hardaway are going to have to continue this run alongside Luka Doncic and Kristaps Porzingis. We've now gotten to the part of the video where we'll be discussing the teams in a serious battle for the final playoff spot, meaning their X factors are going to need to step up if they even want a shot at playoff basketball at all, and the next team in the standings is the Memphis Grizzlies. Their X factor is Dillon Brooks, who has actually begun to come into his own as a legitimately impactful member of the rotation this season. Brooks is in his 3rd season now, and it has easily been his best one yet, as he provides solid perimeter shooting and somewhat reliable shot creation alongside Ja Morant. The Grizzlies had veteran Jay Crowder as their main wing player for most of this year, but now with him having been traded to Miami, his workload now falls on Brooks to play solid defense and make shots. The Grizzlies are way ahead of schedule in their team's rebuild, and a playoff berth already would be amazing for the development of their young core, and after Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr., Dillon Brooks will be an important part of this push. Next up in the standings is the Portland Trail Blazers, and their biggest X factor upon return is Trevor Ariza. Ariza's been around the block through the years, playing on many high-level teams and being a big part of their success, but now he's realistically approaching the tail end of his career. He's 34 years old, and his production is on the decline, but he is still a capable 3-and-D player, and on a Portland Trail Blazers team in desperate need of wing contribution, he will have to give them everything he's got left in the tank if they want to sneak into the playoffs. Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum have carried as much as they could, and Carmelo Anthony has shown that he can still score the ball well on occasion, but defense is the team's biggest weakness, and Ariza is a capable defender. A potential return of Yusuf Nurkic will also shore up some of the defensive holes, but it's going to need to be a group effort all around. The next team in the standings is the New Orleans Pelicans, and their biggest X factor upon return is Lonzo Ball. The Pelicans have had an unusual year, with early struggles seemingly putting a pause on their playoff hopes, but as the year progressed, they steadily improved, and once Zion Williamson got healthy, their chances for postseason basketball became legit. Brandon Ingram broke out in a big way this year, Jrue Holiday continued to be a strong two-way player in the backcourt, and of course Zion made a lot of noise when he started to play, but Lonzo Ball is the one who could put this team over the edge. He's become one of the best young perimeter defenders the game has to offer, his jumper is much more reliable now and consistent than it was when he first came into the league, and his playmaking is top tier. The connection between him and Zion will be very fun to watch, and as it develops, the Pelicans should definitely put some pressure on the Grizzlies for that last playoff spot. The next team in the standings is the Sacramento Kings, and their biggest X factor upon return is Richaun Holmes. The Kings have struggled with depth at the big man positions, and injuries have also hurt in this regard, but when healthy, Richaun Holmes has been a very pleasant surprise for this team. He's always made a name for himself throughout his career as an energizer off the bench that plays hard in spurts, but he never really got a chance to play big minutes until now, and he's taken that opportunity and made the most of it. He's terrific in transition, he's unbelievably explosive around the rim and throws down a ton of vicious dunks, and he works well with De'Aaron Fox in the pick and roll. He's averaging a solid 12 points and 8 rebounds per game this year while shooting 65% from the field, and he's smart enough to stick to what he's good at and make the most impact possible in those areas. The Kings like to play fast, and Holmes is the perfect big man to be in a system like that alongside one of the fastest point guards in the league. The next team up in the standings is the San Antonio Spurs, and their biggest X factor upon return is Derrick White. LaMarcus Aldridge is officially done for the season, and with that news coming out, you have to think that the Spurs will be running some more small ball lineups, with their big man depth being pretty thin. Whether or not White steps into the starting lineup or continues to come off the bench is yet to be seen, but either way, he's now in for a bigger role, and we saw in last year's playoffs that he's capable of handling the moment and producing well. He had a 36-point game in the playoffs last year, so we've seen him prove that he can step up already, and now's the time for him to embrace a more consistently big role. He's a sound all-around player, a very underrated playmaker, and with everything looking like the odds are against the Spurs down the stretch, they'll need White to help beat those odds. And finally, the last team in the standings returning to play in Orlando is the Phoenix Suns, and their biggest X factor upon return is Dario Saric. Saric showed potential to be a highly versatile power forward early in his career in Philadelphia, but ever since the Sixers traded him away, he's struggled to get comfortable in a new environment. At his best, he's an average to above average shooter, a crafty post player, and a very good passer for the position. Whether he hasn't been being used properly, or it's all mental with him, he's fallen off overall with his play in the last few years, but we've seen the kind of player that he can be. The Suns are a long shot for the playoffs, but with a fresh start, they'll need everyone to be clicking to pull off the impossible, and that includes Saric. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below who you think some X factors of some of these teams are. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.